Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another Coffee and Christ on a Sunday morning. Y'all know me. You know my co-hosts, Michael and Jonathan, and Kahuna has joined us first thing instead of showing up late. I'm very impressed.
The Lord sent me a message. My kids started screaming, and I'm like, you know what? I could go outside early today.
There you go. Call
I
it
was like,
God incident.
yeah. Well, I'm like, God, give me a sign. I heard two young boys screaming and saying they're building a fort. I'm like, you know what? Time to go outside.
Right on. So, I didn't have a topic for today. We were just going to kind of jump into what we were talking about yesterday in our men's group chat, but I came across something on social media that I thought might be worth bandying about a little bit, and that is church functions.
Huh.
So I saw a post. I'm not going to call the person out because it was fairly innocent in their question, but I saw a post that was a response to another post that a young man had put up about seeing someone that they might be interested in getting to know, but not getting the opportunity to speak to them immediately after Mass because once the Mass had ended, they shot right out the door into the parking lot, which is fairly common in Catholic circles. If you are a Catholic, you may have noticed, or a new Catholic, you may have noticed or are accustomed to the fact that there are two exit points in a Catholic Mass directly after communion or after the going hymn when the Mass has officially ended. Now, in my parish, the way they do it is the final blessing, then we all say a prayer to St. Michael, and then the going away hymn begins, and the priest and procession proceed out of the sanctuary. Then once the hymn is over, the rest of the people leave. But about half of them go immediately after communion. They get their wafer and they go straight out the door into the parking lot. Now, this is common practice in Catholic circles. And the conversation that was being had on social media reminded me of this, and I wanted to mention it to you guys. There's a weird dichotomy because most people have two camps when it comes to this concept. Where's the socializing after church? You hear that in a lot of the other denominations, Protestant, Baptist, Presbyterian. Why don't we hang out and talk to each other? And with Catholic culture, what I've noticed is that socializing is for church social functions, not for Mass. Some people do. Some people hang out for a couple of minutes and chatter with each other. But usually what happens, I hung out a couple of times and then I realized, oh, we're supposed to leave. So I just go right out the door once we're done. But when I was hanging out just to watch people, there were a couple of folks who would crowd together and talk for a couple of minutes. But ultimately, the priests were the ones who were like, hey, scoot. And I think part of it is there, especially with late Mass, like the evening Masses, which most people get the opportunity to go to because a lot of people work during the day. They're trying to shut the building down because they have other responsibilities that they need to go take care of for the parish itself. So it's a culture of we have things to do. We've been here to glorify God. This is our job at Mass. If you want to hang out, we'll hang out together. If you want to hang out at a parish function, feel free, because they don't shoo people out the door in parish functions. They usually just wait and let people enjoy talking to each other until they trickle out, and then they pack up and leave. So, and one of the more interesting sides of it is, unlike the Protestant churches I've been to and the Presbyterian churches I've been to in my area specifically, the Catholic parish that I go to has more social functions during the weeks. Instead of just hanging out on Sundays and being social, they have actual things. Like I've gone out and had beers with some of the priests and some of the people from my parish at one of the local bars, and we have great conversations with that. They have actual fundraiser functions, donation functions, and all of these things are considered social activities. You're supposed to come help out and get to know people. But mass is not what that's for, according to at least the two parishes that I've been to in my area, one which I am registered to, and the other one I didn't find all that interesting. And the reason I bring it up is because the one I didn't find interesting was more social, but they were also a bunch of Karens. And that ultimately may be what the structure battles against. Like, you want to be social at these other things. But we're here to glorify God, not get in the sewing circles.
Huh.
I don't know that for sure. It's something I'll have to bring up to my priests and deacons next time we get together for drinks, but I will get back to you on that one. But it got me thinking about it. So what do you guys have obviously, I know, you've been exposed to different denominations of Christianity over the course of your lives. Am I off base on this? It's an observation I've wanted to bring up to see if it's something you guys had experienced before.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why that drove me away from Catholicism was the Karen type bantering / nitpicking of other folks, judging, and don't get me wrong, we all judge to an extent. But when you coming straight from mass, glorifying God, and then you're talking bad about someone's dress or someone's hair, or like immediately after, that's one of the things that drove me away from Catholicism was the hypocrisy, and of course in my adult life realizing we're all hypocrites and all that, different revelation. But at that time, that was one of the things that drove me away. I will say that I go to a non-denominational Christian church now, and we hang out afterwards, and there's time to hang out before, but it isn't so much, at least my conversations, like it's not it's fruit filled. It's fruit filled. It's actual fellowship with some of the guys versus some of the other conversations that I've heard in the past. So it could just be, I'm fine with hanging out afterwards, because I think even through fellowship, before or after glorifying God can still very much so occur.
Dang it, Jonathan. You said everything I was going to say pretty much, man. I'm like, any activity that's not directly sin, that's done with other Christians and done with good intentions and good purpose and good results, I'd say glorifies God. And so my church is like yours, very social, maybe more social than a lot of Catholics, and definitely more than Orthodox people would prefer, because we have a coffee shop. It's not like a drive-through or anything, but you can go in and hang out and have coffee and do all that. So we have a very, very social church. And so, yeah, there's almost always hanging out before and after. And because we have too many members in the church right now, like there's always the in-between services as well that's all social. So, yeah.
Yeah, our parish is pretty well and truly stocked on any given mass. There's a lot of people that come in and out over the course of the day's activities. And it's not that they're not social, It's just they seem to understand that there's a structural difference between the attending of mass versus a social gathering of the community. It doesn't linger. You don't overstay your welcome in a Catholic parish, is what I'm kind of noticing. They, there's always the meet and greet with the priest after and before mass begins. They're always hanging out in the front so you can say hi to them and talk for a couple minutes, but nobody just stands there and jaws for a half an hour.
Do you think it's bad that people do, or some people like
No,
to?
I don't. I actually, I kind of prefer it. There's a mindset to it that I appreciate, because the other parish that I went to, they do stand there. Like there's a core group of people that will show up an hour early for mass just to stand around and talk. And then they linger afterwards and stand around to talk. And me being a people watcher. Good morning, Maji-chan. Me being a people watcher, I've hung out just to observe how people behave in different environments. And I don't need to be there, but it's just something that I do. It works with my writing.
Sasquatches are often like that. They like to observe. They like to stay in the background.
Yeah.
Linger
I
slowly.
mean, that's how I was at Royce's party.
Can you touch on the Karen experience again?
Well, the Karen part was the most interesting side of it. It was, somebody's going to hate me for saying it, so I'm just going to be blunt. It was older ladies who just stood around in their circles and talked about everybody else.
Quite standard, yes.
There were nitpicks about the mass itself, about the homily, about this person, about that person, about this upcoming event, that upcoming event. And I get, I know fundamentally women are far more social creatures than men are, but there's a point where my people watching started to notice the priests, the deacons, and the people that were in charge of maintaining the building were doing the looking at their watch thing eventually. Like, come on, people, go. We've got stuff to do. But they were trying to be as polite as possible about it. And in my mind, I find the common structure of when mass has ended, you leave better than making everybody stand around and wait for some folks that just want to stand there and talk. And unlike other denominations that I've gone to that aren't as social in their other days of the week, they have plenty of other activities. So there's really no reason to stand around after mass. You're going to go see these people in a day anyways, because there's always something to do on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday or Friday or Saturday.
I think that may be part of it. We have a lot of people at my church, and we have a lot of activities outside of just Sunday or Saturday night service.
Right.
But the percentage of people that go to those things, depending on what it is probably a smaller percentage of the overall church population. So Sunday is their time of fellowship. They're not getting as much of that during the week as perhaps a smaller Catholic church. And I don't know what you're like. It may just be logistical. I've been to a Catholic mass before in different places in Michigan specifically, quite for a while. And the building itself there was not a lot to it. It was a very nice building, very beautiful building, but there wasn't like a social area. There was the chapel, and then like there was back rooms like for the priests and for the people working there,
preparations and such,
prep rooms and such. But there wasn't like a big foyer, like a giant foyer half the size of the chapel. That there's pretty much it. If you're going to hang out, you hung out on the lawn, and so maybe it's just a logistical thing.
It could be. All the churches around here that I've visited, they have their sanctuary, which is for, the actual church time, whatever you may call it, mass or just, sermoning. And then they have a fellowship hall. The fellowship hall is where most of the time people migrate to, but it's still in the building. So the caretakers of the building have to be present in some capacity, and then holds them up from whatever they need to be doing in their lives. But the whole reason I brought it up was from a biblical standpoint. If activity as a community of Christians should be an ongoing kind of 24/7, 365 thing, then perhaps this way of doing things, where mass is for mass and the other things are for Christian community gathering, works better, because then you're parsing it out over the course of the week instead of just trying to get your Christian fix just on Sunday and then ignoring it for the other 6 days.
I think it has to do a bit more with personality, perhaps, than anything. If your pastor is an introvert, I think he would definitely prefer parsing it out over the course of time instead of getting it all in on Sunday. I don't know if there is a right answer. I think that's partially why there are so many denominations in the Christian church, is because there are so many different kinds of people out there. Like when it comes to doctrine, we should try to agree. We should generally agree on some of the main things, but in
Definitely
regards to
agree on the main
practice,
things.
well, I know that's a whole argument. This is very
Yeah, a whole
bare bones
different
surface
topic.
level.
I know. I'm not very absolute, but that's one thing I am absolute on. We should definitely agree on the main things.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. But when it comes to practice, like say my grandma, she kind of misses her old church. They would sing hymns, and they would have, like, when the pastor or when the preacher would say something, we would respond in a very specific phrase that I definitely didn't get
Yeah,
wrong
mass
in
is the
fake
same
most of the
way.
time.
Yeah.
And that is much more based in religious practice. In ours, it's a bit more, we're going to have specific messages. We're going to change our style of worship depending on what we're studying in the Bible, and it's different strokes for different folks when it comes to the garnishing and
Fair.
the
And
way of practice.
that brings up the other side of this topic, which is, unlike the other denominations that I've been exposed to over the course of my life, Catholicism has what are known as holy days of obligation. And that is a social, I guess, for lack of a better term, socially reinforced
Rule?
obligatory visitation. So, for example, Ash Wednesday. In a Presbyterian church, Ash Wednesday is, if you can show up, you get your ashes. Ash Wednesday for Catholics is, you better be here. It is considered a holy day of obligation. You show up. We make sure we're available all day long. So after work, on your lunch break, something, you should be here. And it's socially reinforced. Like, they're not going to show up at your house with a pitchfork and a torch and be like, you didn't get your ashes, jerk off. But there's still as opposed to this, I guess what I would call it, the less rigid structure of, well, if you can make it, you get your ashes. The function is, this is something the Bible expects of you. So we expect it of you too, as your parish community.
Was it a question or more of a topic of discussion? Like, was it the premise of what you brought up? Was it more of just like, what's your experience? Let's discuss it.
Yeah,
Or
this
like,
is just
there-
me
okay.
wanting to talk it out, because I'm trying to. The social media post got me thinking this morning. That's all, and I wanted to kind of bandy it around with you guys a little bit.
So my thing is, mass should be mass. Like the church service should be the church service. Now, does it matter that the socializing happens outside of that? To me,
No. No.
But when we are in the church service, let it be mass, or we'll just call it mass to unify everything. When we are in mass, worshiping God, one, we should worship God 24/7, 365. That goes without saying. But when we're in mass, that should be, we are there, we are present. We don't have our cell phones out. We're not chit-chatting to our neighbor about other things. Like we're there.
I don't think anybody's arguing against that, like during
Yeah.
service itself. Yeah.
But outside of that, like let it be just on Sunday, because if that's the day that you can fill up your spiritual gas tank, for lack of a better term, with fellowship specifically, then hey, that is the day God gave you, and you are blessed to have that day, and you should use it. We're fortunate because we fellowship on Saturday. We fellowship this morning. We reach out to each other throughout the week. So like we have a built-in fellowship within our group, which is awesome. And as long as like Kuna said, as long as you're glorifying God doing it, there's no right, there's no wrong. Just glorify God, like ultimately.
Mission first kind of thing.
Mission first. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. I can get behind that. Michael seems a bit pensive.
Always. I mean, I think it's somewhat reflective on leadership, and I think leadership is rare. Like what do you say? True leadership is like I think social discussions are actually necessary, and I say that because I always go back to 2020 when I saw so many churches with mandates, and where I was drawn to, where there was, I think, a strong leadership, was there's kind of a balance that God comes first, and who were the peacemakers versus people who just followed the letter of the law. So I think in the same way, it's very rare to have, and I think it's a good thing, but I think it'll come from, in the same way political change doesn't come from the top up, it comes from grassroots. And it's like that Gandalf quote we discussed, right? It's like, it's small changes. It's people, if we're going to follow Christ, I mean, Christ stood up to the people who were in positions of authority. So I think that, for example, if there's Karens gossiping, what a great opportunity to follow Christ in that moment, right? Like to call that out, or call it out in a way where it's just like, yeah, however you would say it, I'm a sinner, so I don't spend any, like if somebody's gossiping to you, I'm a sinner and I'm not, I don't know their heart or whatever, however you'd say it. But I think it's a healthy balance. Like you get to know people and all that, but it can quickly become too Karen like, and I think yeah, there should be a space for women and there should be a space for men. We're different,
No.
So that's it.
I tend to agree with you. Actually made me think of a more semi-famous quote. A true leader does not take part in consensus. A true leader molds consensus.
Yeah.
I think it molds or is a molder of consensus. I don't remember. I might be paraphrasing a little bit, but it's Martin Luther King who said that. And that's a little bit of what you're talking about, Michael. The leadership guides everyone within their command towards, for lack of a better term, a right or direct way of doing things versus just taking part in the consensus, which is going along with what everyone decides.
And I think you whoever's leading the church needs to be a bold individual for that reason alone.
Agreed.
It's really easy. I think the pastor of my church was too passive for a period of time in his life, even in his older life. And after COVID, he changed his tune and he got fiery again, and he decided, no, I'm going to tell my congregation what is biblical and what is true. I have my own opinions, but that doesn't matter here. I'm going to tell them what is biblical and what is true, and I'm not going to be afraid to say something just because I'm worried about what they'll think about it.
Yeah,
And
and I
Yeah.
think too with that, even that can also fall into the trap where someone who it gets to their head and they're going to mold the church, and that's how, it's going to be their way, and it can become very um dictatorial. So what I'm saying is that in order to truly mold and lead, there also has to be the element of humility. So it's paradoxical. So in order to lead, you have to establish order, right? But at the same time, having that humility, because I think there's plenty of brimstone and, you know, many preachers like that where it becomes very, you know,
prideful.
yeah, I think that's in part what brought up the Karens as well, right? Where it's just like, oh, we want the softer version, right? And it's not. I
Or the harder
always,
version.
yeah, right. And then the harder, it's the age. It's how long has that been around, right? We
Yeah.
become too left leaning of a society, and then it becomes too right leaning of a society, and I think the reason for that, I've seen many people who were Republicans at one point. They're like, I'm never going back to Republican, and vice versa. And it just like you're missing the bigger thing is that I think when you go back into that rebirth, when you really start seeking God, at least for me, and I see it so much, is the paradox, right? The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. I mean, to me, that was one of the most powerful quotes I ever heard. Like a humble leader, a leader who serves. Like it's paradoxical, right? And but it's so cool. There's so much power in that. So I think my point is that yeah, I think that I do agree. Like it is someone who should mold. It should be someone who leads from that perspective, um but humility at the same time, you know.
I think that's why some people have such trouble grasping certain concepts, is because there is a duality at least on the surface level of statement of definition in some ways. It's like for like thinking in regards to the Trinity. It's like how can one person be three people and how can three people be one person? It's they're they're not they're putting it in a box that they can understand and they don't. And so there's
Yeah.
a
Well,
paradoxical issue, like kind of
the
it's
first failure there is person.
yeah. See, I said that purposefully because
Yeah.
that's where the mistake comes in. But um, one thing in regards to like church obligation and things of that nature is I'll use my pastor as an example, but he's like he'll if he thinks there's a problem in the congregation in the way that people are comporting themselves or behaving, he will bring it up. He won't call out specific people, but he will say, hey, this is not something we can let slip. This is not an attitude that I believe is godly or is going to grow the church or is going to be or is representative of Christ's love. But he doesn't say you must change or you leave or we're not going to kick you out. It's by invitation.
Mhm.
And there's a good Striper song about that actually, invitation only. You can't like God invites us to be to become his flock. And it's still our choice. And I think there's value in imitating that in the way churches function. I invite you to join me in this practice. I invite you to join me in this way of living in this social setting. And I think there's a lot of value in that attitude in general. It's very easy, especially like in my life, I'm in charge of a crew. We just hired two new guys, and I have two young boys. The dictator is easier for me, but I don't think it's the best way, and I'm trying to live a life of invitation. if I can.
Well, there's a framing involved in that, I think, because the term itself has a connotation of negative authoritarianism, but there's nothing inherently negative about authority.
Yeah.
It's the extreme of too much authority, which is where what people feel about the word dictator.
I think it
You
comes
muted,
to
Michael.
It's the source of the authority. That's the key. And I think
Yeah.
it what was it? It's the letter of the law versus what is it? The spirit of the law. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's the key. And I think that's really, I think a big part of that is the humility. I think when you lead with the humility, your words have more power when you dictate, because that's really, a dictator is to dictate. I mean, if you're dictating, right, like instruction, that's a good thing, right? It becomes when that's all you do, in a sense, because there is that element of, if that's all you do, then there is no, I think that's where you become kind of, at least for me, the turn off of me was, I think you nailed it, Christian. It's like it's the invitation, right? Because there is power in that, right? It's like, if you're like, I'll do it my way, that's okay. Do it your way. Whereas a dictator's like, no, you're gonna do it my way. Whereas, like, no, I'm inviting you to do it, but you can do whatever you want. There's power in that, right?
To a
Yeah.
certain extent, the dictator is a perception based concept. And what I mean by that is the only difference between a leader and a dictator in the modern sense is whether or not the people see the orders being given as good for them or not.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely reflective on the people too, for sure.
Also, whether or not that's where the humility comes in, because if the leader, dictator, whatever term you want to use here, is not living out what he instructs, then then his words are dead. Like, if I go to work and I tell guys, all right guys, work hard, I'm gonna sit over here and I'm gonna supervise from right over here. In fact, this is a state job. There's gonna be 5 6 of me for every 2 of you.
It's good that you brought that up, though, because historically that's how it works. It's a modern shift in the perspective of authority that has garnered this idea of, well, the leader needs to do the same things that the grunt is doing in the unit. But historically, and this is why I put Draco's comment up, good morning, Draco, the dictator only became negative in the 20th century. Romans had no problem with the word. That is true. Romans also, generally speaking, there were outliers, because all of the wonderful stories have some betrayer in them who thought, hey, this isn't fair to me.
Every mythology historically, on the planet, yeah.
But historically, your general of an army did not engage in combat on the field. He sat on his horse in the back of the total command and gave orders.
I think
but the reason he is the general is because at one point he was the man on the front line.
Correct.
At one point he had to learn to move his unit by becoming a captain, and then move multiple units by becoming a commander, and then move all the units by becoming a general. So the leader of a unit is not meant to be right there in the middle of the muck with the grunt.
Yeah, that's true.
But it's a modern concept that people took as a form of their own power to say, well, I don't have to listen to you. You're not doing the thing that I'm doing.
Yeah, no, that is a modern concept. But even in the ancient past, there was always those who had power unearned, and
Well,
perhaps not deserved, and obviously not deserved. But it wasn't
as far as
every
the
case. I
U.S.
think the modern idea is
meritocracy
that,
is
if you're not,
concerned, yeah, as far as the U.S. meritocracy is concerned, the leader of the company is not expected to be in the office processing paperwork for 8 hours like the office worker is. But that's because they have earned the position to tell the office worker what to do, versus in a aristocratic society, it was the noble folk who were born into privilege that got to tell everybody else what to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think with leadership, it's simple. Like, a good leader will never ask their subordinates to do something they're unwilling to do. Not
I
saying
don't
that
think that's true.
You don't think that's true?
No, I don't think that's true.
All right, break it
Again,
down.
I think that's a modern concept. In the chaos of life, we'll continue to use the battle simulation for this one. In the chaos of battle, I don't think it's inappropriate for a general to command his first or second wave to do something that he has never done in order to succeed.
You misunderstood me. I didn't say that he's done those things. I just said he would be willing to do those things if called upon.
That's what I mean. Normally, like in my mind anyways, I may be wrong, feel free to push back, but in my mind,
Wrong.
a person
Very wrong.
who a person in a position of leadership may not be willing to run the bomb out into the middle of the battlefield themselves. But
I think there's more of a trust thing, right? It's like when Jonathan's saying that
if
he
the
wouldn't.
success of the conflict revolves around someone doing so, then the general would have to choose someone to do so. We can glorify the general who says, well, I'm not going to pick a man for a suicide mission, so I'm going to do the suicide mission myself. That is a gloriously noble and valiant thing. But it's just as gloriously noble and valiant for the grunt who chooses to do it when the general says, hey, I need you to do this. You're probably going to die. And this is all predicated on the purpose of the battle. In my analogy here, you're defending yourself against the subsuming of your ways in a war conflict. Someone is coming into your place to take things away from you and your people. So it's all based around the survival of your people. It may be morally different if you're the invader and you're like, yeah, hey, grunt number 2, take this large explosive and go die in order for us to win. That's a little bit different. But regardless of the nuances of it, it's not outside of the realm of morality for someone to, in a position of authority, to say, I could never do this myself, but I need you to, because without it, we can't survive.
I think there are moments in history where that's happened and where it's been necessary. But most of the better leaders that I've read about typically ask.
Oh yeah.
It's not always a command. It's in a sense, it's still invitation. It's, we need someone to undertake something that is very dangerous or possibly like 100% fatal for the sake of others. And most of the time in history, they ask somebody willing to if they're willing to undertake that on behalf of everyone else.
Yeah, the noble sacrifice. It's a very common piece of history. Even Christ was a noble sacrifice.
Yeah. And even he asked if there was a way that he could forego. I'm not sure the right word, but if there's a way to accomplish this without this harrowing act when he prayed to his father in the garden.
That's fair.
Yeah, so big draw I've seen from this conversation is a lot of it comes down to leadership and styles and how the social order of a particular church is created and led forward.
That all leans back on our favorite topic, intention.
Correct. Well, that's what I was saying with leadership. Like, a good leader also knows that they aren't the best qualified to do every single task. But if it came down to it, like if they were the last man standing for the mission, would they be willing to do X, Y, and Z task? And the answer should be yes, to be a good leader, right? They should be willing if they were the last man standing. But are they the best qualified? Probably not, because there are, generals out there that you give them a 50 cal,
Not sure what happened.
and they would not be, they won't be solid on it like a gunner would, or
Right.
sniper rifle. Like, they wouldn't be solid on it like a trained sniper would be. But would they be willing to pick it up if called upon? And my hope would be, from a leadership perspective, the answer would be yes.
Kahuna's having some technical issues.
I know. It's popping in and out.
Yeah. It's all good.
But but leading should come from the sense of service, like, ultimately, right?
Yeah,
That's
and the
kind of
greater
what our
good
discussion, the greater
is
good.
a big argument when it comes to leadership.
Yeah,
Again,
which can be
historically, if you read old like the classics, there's always someone within the ranks who questions that greater good. And usually as a learning parable within the story, the questioning of that greater good comes from a personal, more selfish position of, well, use Gladiator because Michael loves that
Just
film.
literally was thinking about that movie.
Yeah.
Great movie, dude.
Like,
using
there's
that,
the trust. There's a trust element in why did I just forget his name? But yeah, Russell Crowe. There's the trust in him, right? So it's like, to Jonathan's point, like, I don't think they would ask someone that correct me if I'm wrong, they wouldn't want to do, where Daniel was saying that, well, no, that might be a situation. I think the another piece to that is the faith element. They had such faith in him as a general that I think even they would trust him because of how he demonstrated himself in the battlefield, and he was always honorable and trustworthy. So the faith element plays a higher factor. So if I believe in my general, I'll do something that I normally wouldn't do. Not always, right? I also might disagree, but there's a higher likelihood that I believe in his mission based on, what he's done in the past, that I'd be more likely to follow that. I think just something that popped in my head when that came up.
Yeah, that's true. The other side of that is, for example, from the film "We Who Are About to Die Salute You."
Never seen that one.
Yeah, is that good?
So, well, no, that's the statement the gladiators say before the battles. In the arena begin.
Okay, I was like,
They
I've never
say
heard
that.
of that.
They say that to the ruler and to the general public.
That was in Gladiator.
Yeah. And so here's the thing. The question that I have about that, based on the conversation that we're just having, these men are indentured. They expect to be murdered for people's entertainment in a life or death blood sport. Why do they say that?
I think because the cost of not saying it is death, but to your
But the cost of being in the arena is death.
I think they were sarcastic.
I think it was something obviously required by leadership.
Yeah,
but
just following. Like, and
yeah,
that's why. That's why
following. They're war slaves. They have no agency. They don't exist as anything other than
because they believe that. Because that's why he didn't salute. Like, right. Everybody else saluted. He didn't. He chose not to.
Social construct. Same reason why people leave mass right after.
He accepted death on his terms because he
So
didn't
all these
agree on the
other
terms of the authority.
gladiators that entered into the arena and said this before being, maimed and slaughtered were going along with a leadership foundation that they didn't fundamentally agree with, but they did it anyways. None of them wanted to be in there. And yet they all said the phrase before they tried to kill each other. It's a level of conformity even against their own personal agency, with the exception of I believe it was Maximus was his name.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Who refused to because he saw it for what it was. You're not going to get down in here and get yourself killed. Why should I salute you?
I suppose it's different in terms of the movie versus in terms of history. Most
But it was
gladiators,
historical. They did say that it was a requirement. And the point I'm getting at is, if you individually think about it from the perspective of you being a gladiator, you are either going to die in the arena, or if you don't say the thing and give the salute, they'll kill you after the show. So your choices are die or die.
And that's, I mean, that's why I think I'm so drawn to the movie. I definitely agree with you, Christian. We can definitely expand on that. Like, movies are not, in some element, reality, but they also, I think, are as well. And I think what drew me so much, to Daniel's point, to this movie was the fact that you want to talk about paradoxes, right? He demonstrated humility and discipline, and he also demonstrated risk and doing something that he could completely, screw it up, right? So he's plotting to get after the emperor in one scene with a politician, and the next scene he could kill the emperor right in front of everybody. He has the opportunity to, and he does it. And he also has the opportunity when the emperor is basically saying how he destroyed his family in a horrific way. And he uses his discipline, where, as the viewer, you would think in that opportunity, in that moment, he even if he said something, it would be understandable as the audience, right? Especially in our culture, where it's like, say something, get back at him. He chooses not to, because he chooses the higher path. He says to him, your time for the time for honoring yourself will soon come to an end, your highness, right? So he's giving him what he really was after, which was power. So, but there was also another scene where the whole audience was chanting kill, and then he doesn't kill him because the call was to kill the person. So he doesn't follow his authority, and he chooses to let him go. What happens? Leah, Maximus the merciful, and the whole. So they're all chanting, and then because he's not following that script, and the reason I say it is because it's paradoxical, and the point is that in order to disobey authority, what's more required is not just disobedience to authority, it's internal wisdom. That's what we're all talking about, all of our calls. We're trying to follow Christ and go inward so that we can act outward appropriately. And a keyword appropriately, that's the difficult part, because that requires the element of surrender, and it requires the element of faith, because in each scenario, it's not absolute binary. That's, I think, one of the things that is so difficult, especially 2020. It was not binary. Do you not wear a mask, or do you wear a mask? Great. Now you're in a box. You're against the maskers and the anti-maskers, the vaxxers, the anti-vaxxers. But very few people were able to articulate and to navigate with wisdom without cowering their viewpoint, right? In order to bridge the gap without sacrificing truth. And that's the hard thing, right? That's the thing you can't. A big part of it is an element of faith. You have to make a decision. You have to, you have to be willing to make mistakes and all that.
I think part of it is, if you're in that position, it's standing up to a dictatorial or bad authority while not standing against authority in general as a concept. It's like, if you have a bad church leader in a church, you don't stand up against authority of the Bible. If you stand up at all, you stand up against the authority of the individual And I think that even parallels that movie to a degree as well. He wasn't against the authority of Rome. He was against the authority and the the cruel detachment of his ruler in that particular moment. Partially because he wasn't the rightful ruler. So
I have a question,
No.
specifically to Michael. After all of that, how would you reconcile that lack of absolutes with the Sermon on the Mount from Matthew?
Expand.
Well, in the part teaching about oaths, I looked it up because I didn't want to screw it up. So 33 through 37, again, you've heard that it was said to your ancestors, do not take a false oath, but make good to the Lord all that you vow. But I say to you, do not swear at all, not by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Do not swear by your head, for you cannot make a single hair white or black. Let your yes mean yes and your no mean no. Anything more is from the evil one.
I think that has more to do with honesty.
What specifically that I said that's the point of contention?
The paradox of, and maybe it didn't come across to me the way you meant it, or I just misunderstood it. The paradox that you brought up of doing, I guess, to sum up, of doing within an understanding of what's happening. I'm trying to figure out how to exactly sum up what you said, because that was a lot. To make my point, I guess, there isn't a nuance to direct right and wrong, which we agree with. But
I guess what I'm saying is I understand your so
to one person, yes should just, to every person, yes should just mean yes and no should just mean no. There should be a binary in that, not a room for gray area discussion and compromise.
And there is when it comes to absolute truth.
Yeah, so we've had this discussion before, and I think it's a good discussion because I think
it's a difficult one.
It is a difficult one. And it will come to me on how to articulate it, because I think this ties into the paradox. One person could do something that is wrong, and another person can do the exact same no, not the exact if it's hard to I understand what you're saying, because yeses are yes and nos are nos. So right is right and wrong is wrong.
Right.
But I think people can act differently towards that. In other words, like, maybe I can go with this, that the heart of the action is more important than the action. And I think people can have opposite actions and still be in a good in alignment with God. I think
based on the result.
Yeah, so like if
I think two people could do different things while still being spirit led.
I think a part of it is the conscious awareness behind it. It's like if you look at all the propaganda that we've received, and one person, I don't know. I guess maybe this is something that I thought about, that there's like, if you have someone.
That was what I was getting at with the propaganda thing. It should just be a blanket no.
Yes, right. So but the thing is, right, like it should be a blanket no. And I think that was something that I stumbled upon, is that the conscious awareness behind it is a lot of people didn't know what they were doing, right? So when you say yes, adaptability without adaptability without compromising truth is the path I'm talking about. Because sometimes there's a, I think, and again, we've talked about this, so break down my argument so it can become stronger, please. But it's what I recognize, and I had a discussion with a gentleman a while back about this, right? Is that I was adamantly against forcing people to wear masks, especially, I mean, I
Mhm.
was working out and I had people, bashing me to wear a mask. And I was just like, dude, this is my one place where I'm not wearing a mask. I'm not in your face. I'm not coughing in your face. I'm not wearing a mask. And I had the police called on me. But what I learned in that experience was that in that moment, maybe, you know, and I did in that moment was I communicated with the gentleman and I learned more about what he was about. So in that moment, I realized that just using force and saying this is like there's a time and a place, there's a wisdom behind it, I guess is what I'm saying, is that your no's still can be no's, but there can be wisdom behind it. If you lead with a no, that might not be the right way to do it. It might be, hey, you know what? This person clearly is against me. Let me understand them first and then say no versus another. So there's two ways of going about it. Maybe no, leading with the no is the right way to go. Maybe
All right.
listening to the person, but you're not compromising the truth of that. The yes is still yes of what you believe, and the no is still the no. But we live in a world with people who believe a million different things. The key thing is that you're not compromising the truth, to your point, right? But you're also leading it with wisdom. If someone is, you know, you guys have children, Jonathan, you have different children. How you speak to one child is going to be different than how you speak to another child, but
Yeah.
you can still do that without compromising the truth.
Yeah. So I guess I think I understand better. It was more a reactionary yes and no versus at, as an example, I see what you're saying, but no, it doesn't work that way. Um, that makes more sense. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. But because I've
Oh, that
also
was that was well explained.
but I also think at the same time that I've fallen into that trap of compromising my truth. That's something I, you know, I'm
We
not
all
going to
have.
speak. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I also recognize that as well. And that's what makes it so difficult, is because to love your enemy, I think is intertwined into that. It doesn't mean you actually love. I think loving your enemy is, I've said it before, is like, it's, you essentially you take the power away. We talked about it in, I think, the last call, is that that's how Christ, when Christ loved his enemies, they, I think, what did you say? It's an act of courage.
Mhm.
Leap of faith.
There's nothing inherently wrong with telling a person that what they're doing or the thing that they think about something is wrong if you understand it in an absolute way. But I guess what you're getting at is the difference is not is in saying that the thing is wrong versus telling the person that they're wrong, which
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree with. That I think is what Matthew was talking about. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. It's not about swearing oaths. It's not about forcing people to believe your response to whatever they said. It's just simply about stating the earnest truth. The This concept that you have in your mind is incorrect. This is why it's incorrect as an absolute truth. Now, if it's not an absolute truth, if you're just like we are right now, just banding about concepts trying to get to an absolute truth, then there's room for more discussion. But once we've reached that
Yes.
fundamental point, then it becomes a yes is yes and no is no.
Yes. Absolutely. I think that's another part that's tied into it too, because to say absolute truths, It requires a level of growth and to achieve that place in time, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, I can get on board with that.
There's also like, in terms of doing what is right and absolutely right, I've thought about this concept quite a bit, and that comes down. I think sometimes it comes down to the time. The Bible talks how there's a time for everything, and for me, like an example I'll use is just like heroes and stories, because that's something that one way I view the world.
Mhm.
Do I think that the man who stands up and defends the innocent by killing the people who would come to kill, steal and destroy, do I think that's heroic and good? I think most of the time, yes. But when I think of the most heroic moments, I think of Luke Skywalker tossing the lightsaber when surrounded by his greatest enemy.
I think I know where he was going with that.
A ball hit the camera. I know what that looks like.
Yeah,
Yep.
or I think of that Braveheart scene, man. That's one of the. It's a little different, obviously, the context, but when he's betrayed and the look that he
Mhm.
gives him, that has more power, I think, than any weapon in that movie. Where it just like he just he believed he believed in him. He believed in him to do the right thing, and he betrayed him. And that look commands him, in a sense, at least as I see it, like to take action. He picks him up, and that was in my view like one of the best moves that he could do. He didn't get mad at him. He didn't fight back.
Even
Yeah.
better,
Betrayal
that was the
scene.
moment that if I remember the scene correctly, Robert the Bruce lost his authority over him as a leader. Is in that betrayal, because he was compromising on
His word.
his plan in discussion with Robert up until that betrayal.
Mm.
And that's what that look was you're no longer a man who can lead me. He broke my heart.
It's like I took a chance that everybody said I shouldn't take, and you have betrayed not only my trust, but the trust of all those who believed in me. It's
Yeah.
a substantial look. Or even like real world examples, there are some heroes from the different world wars or Vietnam or the Korean War where they were very violent, hardcore men, but they sacrificed tremendously for the good of their men and the good of the cause. And then you have those like Doss in Hacksaw Ridge, part of the what was it, 282nd? I might have the unit wrong, but yeah, where he never fired a rifle at anybody, but it was still a very noble and Christ-like thing to action to perform. And I think both those kind of men, while taking different action, are still pursuing Christ in their choices most of the time, anyway.
Yeah. That is fair.
Alas, gentlemen, I must leave. I've been the call
Yeah,
has
we're
been
over the hour mark, so I'm probably going to call it very soon. But this definitely a fantastic conversation as usual.
Yeah. Thanks for joining, Christian.
yeah.
Good
Thanks for
stuff.
having me, guys. I try not
Oh,
to put my foot in my mouth too often, at least not on camera. All right, God bless you guys.
You too, buddy. Yeah.
Happy Sunday.
have a good one. Well, we can wrap things up here like we usually do. Michael, tell everybody where they can find you if they want to talk paradoxes.
Yeah, YouTube. Just type in my name. That'll lead you to anything that connects with you.
Jonathan, what about you?
All social media. I'm at _wellness dad. Happy to talk about anything.
And this particular live stream series is for conversations. So if you have a question that you want to hear us spurg about for an hour on any given Sunday, leave a comment on any of these shows. I review the comments as they come in, and I can bring them up to these gentlemen in the next one. I'm Daniel P. Riley. I write books. I help other people write books and tell stories because I love storytelling. And there was no greater story ever written than the Bible.
Amen.
So that'll do it for today, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And as always, get thee to church. We'll see you next time.